Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rick Tate. I'm the chairman of the Pickens County GOP, and I thank you for watching on the live stream and for coming out tonight, and for really a nice turnout tonight for the leader of the Senate. The Republican leader of the Senate is with us tonight. But as always, we will start tonight with a prayer. Mr. Winchester, Mr. Dan Winchester will lead us in a prayer.
Let us pray. Oh God, we thank you for the great opportunity to be here together this evening in this evening hours. We pray that you would help us when we stumble in our ways and are stressed out. We know that we are always yours, and we pray for your wisdom and guidance in our lives. And Lord, we know that there may be something wrong with our nation at this point in time in history. And we pray that you would give us all guidance and wisdom and help to help right matters in our local and state and our nation. And Lord, we just pray for help and guidance and wisdom of our legislatures and our persons here to speak to those issues. We pray for goodness and help in our lives as we follow you each day in part of our lives, and give us strength and guidance. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Winchester. If you join me now, I'll stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. I'd like to welcome our senator from Pickens County here, Rex Rice, for coming out tonight. And on a personal note, Tom Rice and Rex Rice are two different people. So everybody get that straight. Rex Rice is a state senator. Tom Rice is a United States congressman, I believe. Two totally different people. But before I leave you alone, Rex, I just want to say that we are proud to have you as our representative. I've never known a finer gentleman or a man, and to have someone of integrity, somebody I respect the way I respect you as I've got to know you, it's a plus here in Pickens County. We're proud to have you as our representative. On a personal note, not to belabor this for too long, but I recently had a death in the family and lost my only brother. And all the prayers and support from my Republican Party family is greatly appreciated. The older you get, the more you appreciate true friends that are there for you when you really need them. And the people you don't have to ask for anything, the ones that just show up and say, what can I do? The old adage of, I'd rather have friends than money. There's a lot of truth in that. That's the way I feel. Now, to politics. I got a word or two to say before I turn this over to the leader, or to our leader. And you are our leader. This is a Republican Party here in Pickens County. You are our leader. On this past election, we're getting hammered on the way we talk about it. It's like we're a bunch of idiots if we say that the election was stolen or if there was any fraud. Let me say this. The way you word things to bring people over, to make them understand your point of view is important. So here is the way I describe what happened. I try to stick with facts, something I can prove, something I can point to and say, go look at this. This is the truth. I'm not making something up. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. And the fact is, the Constitution says the only people that can make election law is the state legislatures. State legislatures elect the president. That's how we do it with Electoral College. The key battleground states where the argument has taken place over what happened, they changed election law. Election laws were changed. There's not even an argument about it. By the state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, by governors, by secretaries of state, even down to election board officials at the county level. They changed election law. So what I say is this, simply, I don't know what the election outcome would have been had they done it in a constitutional fashion, but they conducted the elections in an unconstitutional fashion. That's not arguable, I don't think. There has been no court case where they have took a long, hard look at the evidence and presented a ruling on merit. All of the court cases have been kicked out on technicalities like it was filed too late or you don't have standing, things like that. There has been no finding of fact in a courtroom where the election, what happened in the election was examined, taken a good close look at. But I'm not going to belabor the point. I think I've made my point. The whole point of what I'm trying to say is the soul of wit is brevity. Keep it short and to the point to make your point, and that's my point. Those elections in those states were handled in an unconstitutional manner, and we need to fix that so it doesn't happen again. Okay, now that I got that off my chest, I'm going to turn this over to State Senator Shane Massey, who is the leader of the Republican caucus in the Senate in South Carolina. And one thing I want to say before I hand over the mic to him, I saw on social media where he was getting hammered a little bit for an amendment that he put forward to get the heartbeat bill through. And from everybody that I've talked to that knows anything about what happened, the bill would not have passed without the exceptions amendment. I've talked to several people. Without the exceptions amendment, and he can talk more on this himself, the bill, we wouldn't have the bill. We wouldn't have anything to celebrate. So I thank you for your work and for getting the Heart Bill passed today. And with that, I will turn this over to Shane Massey. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Rick. And Rick, very sorry to hear about your brother.
Thank you.
For you, man. That's
Thank
tough.
you.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to know that you got friends in times like that. So it's good to have family. So hey, everybody. I was talking to Rex earlier, and he said, "You coming up to Pickens tonight?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm coming up." He said, "I don't know what kind of crowd you're going to get. It might be kind of small." Well, from where I come from, y'all, this is a big crowd. So I appreciate you coming out tonight. I know there are all kinds of other things that you could be doing, lots of other things you could be doing to spend your time tonight other than coming to listen to me, but I appreciate you coming out, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So, look, I want to talk about a number of things that we've done in the Senate and some of the things that I think are going to be coming up, because I think you need to know about those things. But first of all, let me take a step back and say this. So I was elected leader in 2016. And I'll tell you, I'm trying to move around, make sure everybody can see me. I'm sorry. If I move this way, I got people over there. I was elected in 2016 as leader. And I tell you, y'all, it was really something that I never wanted to do, because it's a job, it seemed to me, that was a no-win job. You're going to get blamed for everything because you're in the majority, but you really don't have any power to do anything. So I didn't want that job. But when the previous leader, who's now the president of the Senate, stepped down, I had a number of other senators ask me to step up. I'm like, I really don't want to do that. But finally I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. But I said, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it right. And that means I want the South Carolina Senate to be a conservative majority that is going to govern in a manner that's going to address the problems and the challenges that South Carolina faces. Because I'm convinced that there are real challenges out there, but that these challenges can be addressed with conservative ideas. I believe in ideas. I believe what we believe philosophically can address the challenges that are out there without having to rely on government to do everything for us. Right? I know that we can do this. I know that our ideas will work. We needed people who are going to step up and promote those things. And so I've tried to do that. And this is something that takes a little while to change. but we've had some really good people who've been elected to the Senate in the last couple of election cycles that are really helping make my job a whole lot easier. Rex Rice is one of those guys. Rex is a really, y'all know this already, so I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. He is a super smart guy who pays attention. He reads everything. He gets involved. The guy doesn't sleep. I was picking on him the other day. I thought I was getting up there to state. I go home every night. I live about an hour and 20 minutes away from the State House. I got there a little before 9 o'clock. I thought I was getting there early, and I was early compared to everybody else, except there was one truck that was already in the parking garage. And so I texted Rex. I'm like, you stayed here last night, right? And he said, no, I went home. I mean, the man leaves at like 5 o'clock in the morning to come to Columbia or something. I mean, but he's always there, no matter the fact that he's the furthest one away. The guy does a great job, and y'all need to know that. I mean, not just him telling you. I want to tell you that. He does a great job representing you, and I appreciate you sending him there. But we're fortunate because Rex and I have a very good team. And that team has allowed us to focus on some of the most important issues and focus on some of the most important conservative issues. And I hope we're going to continue focusing on those things. Because in November, this past November, South Carolina sent 30 Republicans to the South Carolina Senate. That's a big deal, right? We've never had that size of a majority. Republicans took control of the Senate after the 2000 elections, when we had one person from Greenville switch in 2001. I wasn't there then, but that's what happened. That's how Republicans took control of the Senate. And it's gained a little bit every election cycle thereafter, to the point that we've had, well, I flipped a Democratic seat when I was first elected. We had 3 flips this year. That's a big deal. I mean, that's significant. 3 flips in 1 year in the state legislature, that doesn't happen. But South Carolina gave us 30, and I think South Carolina gave us 30 because South Carolina wants us to use 30. Right? And there is responsibility that comes with that. We recognize that. There's also a burden that comes with that, and that is to lead in a responsible, conservative manner. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, I'll start off and just talk about the big victory, and I think this was a big victory that we had today. And that is in passing the heartbeat bill. Y'all, this is the most significant pro-life piece of legislation that will have passed South Carolina's legislature ever. Yesterday, there was a press conference with some pro-life leaders, and Holly Gatling, who is she's the head of the South Carolina Citizens for Life. Many of you may have met Holly. She's a great advocate for the unborn. Holly said, I didn't realize this. She said that there have been 16 pieces of pro-life legislation that have passed the General Assembly. 16 pieces. Every one of those were important. Every one of those mattered. This one's the biggest. This one has the potential to be the most impactful. This one has the potential to save the most lives. It will say, if the courts uphold this, when the courts uphold this, I think the courts are going to uphold this. When the courts uphold this, we will reduce by over half the number of abortions performed every year in South Carolina. That's something to clap for. That is a big deal. Now, Rick mentioned the amendment that we had to put on it. Now, if we took a show of hands, my guess is, and I'm not going to do this, but my guess is that there's some people in here who think that there ought to be a rape and incest exception. My guess is there's some people in here who think that there ought not be a rape and incest exception. I get that. South Carolina is just as divided on this issue. We had a vote. We had a vote on an amendment to keep rape and incest exception out. That amendment failed. Now, we could have done that 4 or 5 more times, and we would have put ourselves in a much more difficult position. I am not willing to risk saving 2,600 lives for a small chance that I'm going to save 5,100. Right? We were going to lose. You know, part of my job is I got to be able to count. And I've gotten pretty good at counting. And I busted my tail over the last 2 months trying to figure out where our senators were and how they were going to respond to different amendments and how they were going to respond to what the bill is going to look like. I was committed to passing this bill because I was going to save lives. That amendment saved lives. that amendment got that bill passed. Rick, you're right. That bill would not have passed without that amendment. And I'm going to tell you what we did by passing it. Y'all, we completely demoralized the Democratic caucus. They were demoralized. Some of you may have watched it on television, but if you were there in person and you saw this, they were demoralized. I'd played chess games in my head for the last month. What are they going to do? What's their move going to be to this? How am I going to respond to that? Right? We were almost certainly going to get a filibuster. We didn't get a filibuster in the end. We didn't get a filibuster because they knew we had them. They knew we had them beat. In fact, yesterday I was talking to the minority leader, who's his name is Brad Hutto. He's from Orangeburg. And what Brad had told me earlier in the week was that they probably were not going to filibuster on second reading. We get to have 3 readings, right? They were probably going to filibuster on third because third reading, we have a higher vote threshold. That's because he told me, he said, I think you can get it on second. I don't know if you can get it on third. And I said, one way to find out. After we got that amendment passed and we had the vote on second reading, he told me, he said, we're not going to filibuster. He said, if you'll give us till 2 or 3 o'clock on Thursday, we'll be done. All right. And I said, well, Brad, look, if you get some pressure from your guys, I want you to let them know I got 28. I needed 26. I got 28. And he said, I know you do. That's why we're not going to filibuster. But y'all, that would not have happened without having 30 this year. It also would not have happened without a tremendous amount of work. Rex and I talked several times about this, about a lot of work, one-on-one work to line our guys up to make sure that we were all together. And we have now, I'm convinced, the single biggest pro-life victory for legislation in South Carolina history. That's something that we should be proud of. I expect the House is going to take it pretty quickly. I think they'll get it down to the governor, and I think this is going to get signed into law very quickly. That's something that all of us in the pro-life community ought to be proud of. A couple other things I want to talk about. One of the things is, and I know there was a little bit of mention about it earlier, Rick was talking about it, but y'all, I'll tell you what, I hear a lot about election integrity. I know you're concerned about it. I'm concerned about it. And I'll tell you this, South Carolina very easily could have been Georgia. South Carolina very easily could have been Pennsylvania or Arizona, but we weren't. And we weren't for a couple reasons. 3 reasons. I'll say 3 reasons. The first one is our election laws are actually pretty stout. Right? We've done a pretty good job over the years with some pretty strong election laws. There are some areas where I think we can make some improvements in, and I'm happy to talk about those. But overall, our election laws are pretty strong. Where we've had problems in the past is having those election laws enforced. We have a statewide election commission that has gotten really slack, and they've not been enforcing those laws as effectively as they ought to enforce them. That's a problem. I've already encouraged the governor, it's time for our state election director to retire. And I hope he will help her do that. He hasn't done that yet, but I hope that'll happen. And I'll tell you why about that in just a second. But another reason is the legislature came back into session in September because we knew we were going to get some hits in some areas. We wanted to make some changes. Now, the thing that got all the attention, the thing that everybody heard about, was that the legislature allowed everybody to vote absentee. Right? Everybody knew that part. Right? There were several other pieces of that legislation that we did to protect election security. That was important. The other thing is this, and y'all may not have heard about this. Y'all, we had to deal with 4 federal lawsuits last year. 4 federal lawsuits and 1 state lawsuit. Now, you probably heard about one of them because one of those lawsuits was the one where the Democrats attacked our requirement that you have to have a witness signature for absentee ballots. Y'all hear about that? Right? We got sued on that. Actually, they sued us in the primary, and the election commission rolled over. And they agreed in the court proceedings that they would accept that. And so in the primaries, if you remember this, in the primaries in June, we did not have a requirement that you had to have a witness signature. Now, that wasn't as big a deal in the primary. I didn't like it then, but it wasn't as big of a deal in the primary as it was in the general. So when that suit came back again in August for the general, the president of the Senate and I got together and I said, Mr. President, we've got to intervene this time. Because if we don't intervene, the election commission is going to roll over again. And to his credit, he stepped up, and he did. And we talked about this, and I said, look, we got some lawyers, some good lawyers. They were good. We won. They were good lawyers, right? But I said, we've got to be prepared at the outset. If you're going to intervene, you got to be prepared to go all the way with it, because we're probably going to have to go to Washington. And he said, I'm in. It's that important. Let's do it. And that's what we had to do, because we lost in Columbia with the district court. We appealed to Richmond. At first we won, and then we lost. So we had to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. First time I've ever had to do anything like that. But I had read a bunch of cases that they'd already handled, and I thought, we've got a pretty good shot here. I mean, the U.S. Supreme Court has been yielding to the states on election law. They've been yielding to, imagine that, somebody in Washington yielding to the states. The U.S. Supreme Court was doing that this year. And so we appealed, we went up, and we won. We prevailed. And so in the general election, our requirement to have a witness signature held. And y'all, that is extremely important. Now, the Election Commission would tell you that we don't need it because we don't ever look at that stuff. Well, the Election Commission doesn't need to look at the signature. The signature is there for law enforcement. The signature is there because and SLED testified to this. SLED agents testified to this as part of that lawsuit, that if there is an allegation of voter fraud, that's the first place that they go to, is the witness signature. Keeping that was extremely important. We had lawsuits where they wanted us to have drop boxes all over the state. Y'all, that's a terrible idea. These unmanned drop boxes, that got some other states in trouble. I mean, we had to push back on that, and I think prevailing on that was a big win for us, for election security. We had people who, South Carolina's law is that if you vote by absentee, your ballot has to be received by election day, right? It's election day, right? That's when the ballot ought to be received by. Well, we had people who they sued us to do this. They wanted to say that as long as it's postmarked by election day, as long as it's received by the following Monday, you got to count that ballot. Well, I ain't doing all that. Y'all, we're not getting into that. Election day is election day. That's when your ballot ought to be received. If we had lost that issue, y'all, we would have been like Georgia. We would have been counting ballots for 2 weeks. And one of the big issues with me, when we came back into session in September to fix some of our laws, what I told the Speaker of the House was, we've got to report results on Tuesday night. Right? That's important for public confidence in the process. We have to report results on Tuesday night. We can't be counting ballots the following week. And I think winning on that issue was extremely important. Y'all, we very easily could have been one of these other states that were in the news. But we weren't. And we weren't because we had strong people at the top in Republican leadership positions that said, we're not going to roll over. We're going to fight back on that. And we were successful because of it. Lots of the other states are having problems. You're right. What happened? And you got the Supreme Court changing the law in some places. You got the Election Commission rolling over in some places, which they did here in the primary. But we said that's not going to happen in the general election. And look, you didn't hear about South Carolina having problems, did you? We performed very well overall, surprisingly well, actually. You always got Richland County. They're an outlier, but the rest of us performed pretty well, and I think you saw the results of that. Even with $120 million coming in from all over the country on a U.S. Senate race, we still held up. And that's a credit to everybody in the room, but it's a credit to South Carolina and the election laws that we have. So I know there are a lot of people concerned about election integrity. I am too. But I think you deserve to know that South Carolina is pretty daggone good on this. There are areas that we can improve. There are areas that we should improve. And I think we're going to take some steps to try to improve. But we're pretty strong. And I think we need to know that. That's something we need to be proud of. I want to tell you something too. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Of course you can. As long as, Rick, is it okay if I take a question now?
No.
Yes, okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The election laws are state laws.
The
election laws are state laws.
Yes, sir. The ones I was talking about, state law. Yeah.
Then why is there an election commission that enforces them? Why don't the state police enforce them like any other state law?
Well, they don't really. They administer them, so it's not necessarily an enforcement, but it's like you have all sorts of state laws, and you have different agencies that administer those laws. And then if somebody breaks them, if it's a criminal penalty, then you have SLED or law enforcement get involved to enforce them. But you've got to have somebody to set up somebody to run the elections. That's what the election commission is supposed to do. Yes, sir.
I've got the overhead working.
Let's let him finish his remarks, and then we'll open the floor up to questions from everybody. Instead of getting into a debate on one thing, let him finish what he's talking about. And then, I mean, it might be some other stuff he wants to cover, and we get hung up on this and stay there forever. So let's.
Just a few more things, and then I'm happy to take whatever questions y'all want to shoot at me, as long as they're nice questions.
Let him finish, and we'll get to that in just a second.
All right. Well, he asked who's on the election commission. Since we're on there, I'll say this: we have all the election commission members are appointed by the governor. So they're from different places around the state, but they're all appointed by the governor. A couple other things I want to mention. One is the very first thing that we did this year, after having 30, the first thing we had to do when we organized our first day, we have to adopt a new set of rules. There were two big changes, and this kind of gets to be inside baseball a little bit, and I'm not going to get into the specifics necessarily. One of the things we did was we changed our filibuster rule a little bit. We still have the filibuster. I want to make sure everybody gets heard. And I told the Democrats, and I told our caucus this, I don't want to be Washington. Right? I got no desire to be Washington. Right? I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard. I'm not going to run over anybody, but I'm not going to let them be Washington either. So we got to make some changes to ensure that we're going to be able to move along when we need to move along. That rule change really affected this week. We didn't have to use it, but the fact that it was there, that they knew that we could move if we needed to move, that helped us get the heartbeat bill passed. The other thing is, and I think this is a significant change as well. Y'all, one of the things that has burned me up since I was first elected is earmarks. I can't stand earmarks. I don't like the earmark process anyway. I especially don't like hidden earmarks. Y'all may have seen some press attention about this over the last couple of years, where lots of times when we're voting on the budget, we don't even know what's in there. This is crazy, right? Your senator ought to know what's in the budget. He ought to be able to find it. It frustrates me to no end that happens. And there have been many, many years where I try to knock out earmarks. I lose. I feel like Don Quixote lots of times. But it's all right. But this year with 30, I made a pitch to the caucus. And I said, look, let's change this. Let's say that if I'm going to ask for money for a project back home, which I don't do, by the way. I don't ask for earmarks. But I said, if I'm going to ask for a project for something back home, I ought to have to disclose who I am, what the project is, and how much it's going to cost, so that then you can see how we're spending your money, right? We got that passed. We changed that rule. That is going to be a big deal, because now you're going to be able to see how the legislature spends your money. I think that is extremely important. Now, I'm kind of geeking out on some stuff here because I get excited about disclosing earmarks, and that's pretty nerdy, right? But this is a big deal, and I think that's something that y'all need to know about. It's something that we should be proud of. That was a big win the South Carolina Senate adopted on the very first day. Now, look, there are other things that we've got to deal with this year. We have got to deal with COVID. Because I will tell you very candidly, I think our statewide response to COVID has been terrible. I think the way that the statewide leadership has handled the rollout of the vaccine has been very poor. I think the communication with the public has been atrocious, because I don't think that you know what's going on half the time. And it's not because you're not looking. It's not because you don't want to know. It's because you're not getting very good information. Right? And it's not Rex's fault. Rex and I had this conversation a few times. Rex calls and tries to get the information. He can't get it either. Right? I mean, it is extreme. I know it's frustrating for you. It's extremely frustrating for us. So one of the things that President Peeler and I have talked about is we've got to be present. We can't be taking time off like what we did last year. Last year, we quit. We didn't quit. Last year, at about St. Patrick's Day, we stopped session. We went back one day in April, one day in May, one day in June and a few days in September. Otherwise, we weren't there, and it was because of COVID. We can't do that this year. And one of the main reasons we can't do that is it is essential for the Senate to be in session in order to keep pressure on the executive branch to do a better job with the vaccine rollout. I know there are a lot of people who don't want the shot, but there are a lot of people who do, and those people who do ought to be able to get it. Right? We've got to do a better job of making sure that happens and making sure that people understand what the process is. Now, that's important for health reasons, but it's also important for this. Look, the governor tells people that he didn't shut down a lot of things this year, and that's true, especially compared to New York and some of these other places, right? But the problem is if you don't do a good job of controlling the spread of this virus, businesses are going to close down anyway. And we've seen that in many cases. Right? We have got to keep businesses open. We've got to keep industry open because we've got to keep people working. We need people employed. We need people, I don't want to give people on unemployment for the rest of their lives. All right? I don't want them making more in unemployment than they can make working. All right? I want them working. It's good for your soul. Right? It's good for your mentality. And it's good for all the rest of us. I want people working, and that means we got to have businesses open. And that means we got to do a better job of getting the vaccine rolled out to everybody who wants it. The other thing is, this is personal to me, but y'all statewide, we have got to have children in school 5 days a week. We have got to have our kids in school in front of the teachers 5 days a week. I have 2 children in public school. I've got a 3rd grader, who is all boy, by the way. I got a 3rd grader and I've got a 6th grader. And we've kind of alternated some this year. We started off on a hybrid schedule, which I didn't like, but I understood why they did it. But fortunately, as they kept monitoring the numbers, we went to 5 days a week. We went to 4 days, and then we went to 5. Right? That was great. Now, the last couple of weeks, we backed off because we had a big spike in our schools. But that really is abnormal. If you look around the state, the safest place for you to be is in a school. Superintendent Molly Spearman told us yesterday, students and teachers make up 20% of the population. Students and teachers make up 3% of the COVID cases. These schools are getting scrubbed down every day. Right? They're making the kids wear masks. They're separating them as far as they can. They've got plexiglass in certain places. These are safe places. The children are safer in school than they are not in school. And when they're not in school, their academic progress is really suffering. It is really suffering. I'm going to tell you a story. My wife is on the school board in Edgefield County. And last month, well, actually, no, it was earlier this month. We're still in January, aren't we? Yeah. It was earlier this month. They had a school board meeting. And in the public session, the principal of the high school came. So in Edgefield County, we've got a charter high school. We have one public high school, Strom Thurmond High School. They keep wanting to change the name of it, and I ain't doing that. But we got one high school. The principal came, and he said that at that time, 38% of the high school students were failing at least one core class. And then the question came, how many of those children are in full remote? And the superintendent says the principal says a significant number of that 38%. Y'all, we have got to get our kids back in school 5 days a week. They have got to be in front of those teachers. I see it with my children. My kids are going to be okay. All right, my kids are fortunate, and I understand that. They're going to be okay, although I don't think their progress is as far as what it should be. But they're going to be a lot better positioned than a lot of these kids who are living in single-parent homes, who don't have the resources, who in many cases don't have internet access, and they don't have the parental supervision to help them with remote scenarios. Right? And what I hear from teachers is that the children who are doing full remote, by and large, are the kids who need to be in the classroom the most. These kids have to be in the classroom. So if we've got to keep some pressure on DHEC, if we've got to keep some pressure on the governor's office in order to get this vaccine rolled out faster, so the teachers will be in the classrooms and the kids can be in the classroom, then dadgummit, we got to do it. Because we are already digging out of a hole in education, and everybody knows it, right? We can't afford to lose a full school year. We've got to have the kids back in school. And I'm hoping that we're going to do some things in the Senate to keep pressure and to try to move in that direction. Now, we're going to take some steps, hopefully next week on education. That's going to help. But we got a lot more to do there. But I think this really may be one of the biggest issues that we've got to deal with this year, having the children in the schools. And we've got to know how the progress is going. You know, we've been doing these tests throughout the year to try. Most districts are doing MAP, what's called MAP tests. My kids take MAP. You have a test right at the beginning of the school year. You got one right before Christmas, and then you got one at the end of the year. And so we've been able to see now what the progress has been from the beginning of the school year through the first semester. And the first test at the beginning of the school year told us what many of us feared, and that was these children lost a lot between school being out in the middle of March and not being in the classroom for 5 months, right? They made some progress between August or September and December, but they're not where we need them to be, right? Even our high flyers, y'all, they are not where we need them to be. We've got to do better, and that means getting them back in school 5 days a week. So I want to push for that. There are a number of other issues that we're going to have to deal with. You know, as I said, we had to cut out last year around St. Patrick's Day. We've got a number of other issues that were left on the table from last year. A lot of things that have come up since then. We could talk about Santee Cooper and the utility situation a lot. That's going to be a big time issue this year. That's been a big time issue the last few years. But we got the budget we're going to have to deal with. We've got later this year, we're going to have to deal with redistricting. That's a very important process. Right? We're supposed to get those numbers back from the U.S. Census Bureau probably sometime in the summer, which means, and I know Rex doesn't want to hear this, that means we're probably going to have to be in session in the fall to deal with this. But that's important. So we've got a number of big issues to deal with. My hope is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that we can tackle some of these important issues. So I know there's people who want to ask some questions, and I'm happy to try to answer some of those. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you letting me speak, and I really appreciate you showing up on a cold night in January, being an advocate and trying to make things better for not only for South Carolina but for the United States. Thank you.
Before I start taking questions, one thing I was remiss in not thanking a couple of people for being here tonight. Chris Bowers, who is a member of our Pickens County Council, and Carla Kelly, who is on our school board. We always appreciate our elected officials coming. And with that,
Thanks for stepping up.
The hands are going up. I believe the overhead will pick you up. You'll just stand up. And this is Michael LaPierre. He was former candidate against, or competed against Lindsey Graham.
So,
Familiar with the name?
yes, sir. Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 2 of the United States Constitution, as we all know, says very clearly, and Rick, thank you for stating that at the outfront, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct. So, I want to ask the same question that this young man asked, but in a little different manner. Why does the South Carolina Election Commission and those who administer the election laws, why do they think, in what world do they think that they get to change the Constitution of the United States of America? So how has that, think through that process. How has the South Carolina legislature allowed the administrators to co-opt the Constitution of the United States of America?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And so here's what it looks like to me. It looks like to me that, I think so the election commission you've got an executive director, and they're governed by a board, the commission members, whom are all appointed by the governor. And my perception of this is that there are some good people who serve on the election commission, but it seems to me like too many of them have taken this to be kind of like a resume builder. It's like they're on they're on a country club board or something, right? I mean, they're just there for the fun, right? They get a license plate, right? So that maybe that's why they're there.
Is it a paid position?
I don't know the answer to that, Rick. I don't. It's probably they probably get mileage to go to the meetings, but there's not going to be a salary attached to it. But there's some ego stroking going on there, right? You get a license plate, brother, right? I mean, people think you're important because of that. But what I have noticed is that the commission members yield almost entirely to the executive director, right? And there's not a whole lot of oversight. I see that in a number. We could talk about that with Santee Cooper too, which I think is a real problem. But it happens in lots of places. And what has happened here is that the executive director has rolled over too many times, in my opinion. She did it in the primary. She would have done it again if we hadn't intervened. And so I think what needs to happen, we need to completely change that format. In fact, what I did, I introduced a bill that says we're going to abolish the commission and we're going to give it to the Secretary of State, like happens in some other states. Now, I don't know that I really love that idea. What I'm trying to do is to spark a conversation. One of my friends, Chip Campson, who's a senator from down in Mount Pleasant, he introduced something the other day that says, one, all these commissioners have to be confirmed by the Senate. Because right now they're not. But you get them confirmed by the Senate, and they got to come before us on a regular basis, and they got to sit there and answer questions. It's a little bit different. But the other change that he proposes is that the executive director, which right now is hired by the commission members with no other oversight, Senator Campson proposes that the executive director needs to be confirmed by the Senate as well, and to have her come in on a regular basis to have that oversight. I think that would be a significant improvement. Now, I'm not wedded to that one either. That's much better than what we got, but we got to change the process because what we've got, we're just fortunate that it worked. Right? I mean, very candidly, we're fortunate that it worked. And I will tell you, and I'm telling you not just because I'm a member of the state Senate, but if the state legislature had not intervened, we would have been Georgia because she would have rolled over. And so we got to change that process.
And the workarounds that happened in our last election in South Carolina, that needs to be buttoned down.
I would go further than that and say it needs to be completely stopped. It needs to be, right, I mean, yeah, we can't have that. Right, look.
It needs to be strictly interpreted and strictly enforced what the legislature passed instead of a living, breathing document kind of approach.
Yeah, I don't want that. But look, we make the law, right? The legislature makes the law. You elect legislators to make the law, right? It's not up to the courts to make the law. It's not up to the governor to issue executive orders all the time to make the law. And it's surely not up to some unelected people who serve on a commission to make the law. The legislature makes the law. And then if you don't like the law, you know who to hold accountable, right? We make the law, and that's the way it ought to be.
So the Texas State House has a long bullet point of 23 different things that they're going to do to stop all of the shenanigans that happened in the last election. Have you looked at what they're proposing? I guess that's the question. I'll send it.
Yeah, please do. Please send it to me. I'm happy to take a look at it. Thank you, sir.
Let's get Roger. And then, there you go, Roger.
Let's staying on this election thing for a minute. The commission that rolled over in the primary election last year, was that a unanimous decision?
Of the commission?
Of the commission, yeah.
You know what? To be honest with you, I don't know that the commission really knew.
Would you speak up, please?
I said, to be honest with you, I don't know that the commission really knew.
Oh.
My fear is that was completely the executive director, and that the commission wasn't all that involved in it. I mean, my impression over the last 6 or 9 months is that the commission members themselves haven't been all that engaged. Now, I think they got engaged later on because they were forced to. But I don't know that the commission members themselves were all that engaged in the process. I think they were yielding a lot to the executive director.
Well, why don't we get rid of them?
Preach, brother. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I think they all need to go. I think the executive director needs to go. I'll tell you something else she did. This is something she agreed to. One of the initial lawsuits in the primary, the Democrats made the argument that making people put a stamp on the envelope to return the absentee ballot was the equivalent of a poll tax. She conceded the point. And so we paid for postage for everybody who got a mail-in ballot because she conceded that point.
Then I want my gas money.
Senator, thank you so much for coming. On the on the heartbeat bill, you introduced the exemption yesterday, just so everyone knows, for rape, incest, and fetal anomaly. Under that provision, one of your colleagues in the House, Ashley Lawton, who was conceived, unfortunately, in rape, would not have been protected. There's a lot of people, there are a lot of senators that are saying, we advocated for this exemption for pragmatic reasons. We advocated for this so that the bill would pass. But you truly believe in the exemption, do you not? You believe that there should be, if in a perfect world, you believe that that should be the exemption, do you not?
What I believe in a perfect world is that there are no abortions, right? Period. All right. That's what I would prefer. But personally, I would prefer a rape and incest exception. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, you also mentioned the fetal anomaly, and I didn't mention that. I'm glad you brought that up because I want to make sure that everybody understands this. I didn't add that. That's an existing law. And it's not just a fetal anomaly, right? It's a fatal fetal anomaly. The way that's defined is it is an anomaly that cannot be remedied and that is incompatible with life after birth, right? So, we're not permitting the abortion of Down syndrome children, right? We're talking about children who cannot live after birth. That's what that is. Yeah.
I've got one I've asked people to email across the state for questions, and here's one that
Across
I got.
the state, man. We got a
Yeah,
big
we're
audience.
statewide tonight.
Man, how about that? Yeah.
Here's a question that was emailed in. The House of Representatives, the State House, last week passed a bill on the, help me out, the power company,
Santee Cooper?
Santee Cooper. I got a mind block there. On Santee Cooper to get us out of the utility business. And the question was, would you fight the conservative fight to get us out of the utility business in South Carolina?
Yeah, so the House of Representatives passed a bill that reforms Santee Cooper, but it keeps open the discussion to sell it. That sounds great to me. Look, I've been involved in this thing from the very beginning, unfortunately, because shortly after VC Summer was abandoned, I read an article in the state newspaper that said that SCANA at the time was applying to the Public Service Commission for abandonment costs. Well, I don't do any utility law. I don't understand what all that stuff means. But it said something about me paying, because I was a SCANA customer, it said something about me paying for 20 years. That got my attention. And so I started making phone calls, and I was talking to some other senators. And I was like, look, I think we need to start asking some questions about this. And that's how we got involved to start asking questions that led to the changes with SCANA and Dominion. Now, I know y'all are fortunate up here. You don't have to deal with SCANA and Dominion, right? How many of y'all are on Duke? And then how many co-op? Yeah, so about a 50-50 split. Well, I'll tell you, those of you with Duke are fortunate. But I got SCANA, and now I got Dominion, and I'm not a big Dominion fan. Right? I wish they'd go back to Richmond. But what we learned is that SCANA was a real problem, but Santee Cooper was a big part of that problem too. Now we knew we had to deal with both SCANA and Santee Cooper, but we had to deal with SCANA and Dominion first because Dominion made this offer to merge, to buy, and there was a time limit on it. So we were running out of time. We had to deal with that one first. But we knew we were always coming back to Santee Cooper. Now the Santee Cooper guys, one of my biggest concerns about Santee Cooper is I don't think they actually recognize the problems, right? Because when they come and they talk to you about it, all they want to talk about is the debt and the costs associated with VC Summer. Well, those are problems. But VC Summer just gave us a reason to look under the hood. And when we opened the hood, there was a lot of stuff under there that we didn't like. I mean, there are a lot of things that we started learning about how Santee Cooper operates. Now, we've got Santee Cooper. Santee Cooper is a New Deal project, right? I mean, it's been in South Carolina since the 1930s, and there was a great reason for it in the 1930s, because there was a tremendous amount of South Carolina that didn't have power. I understand why they did it. Now, part of it was because our U.S. Senator Jimmy Burns was very close to Franklin Roosevelt, so he got the federal taxpayers to pay for all of it, and then they gave it to South Carolina. Santee Cooper has done a lot of good things over the years. They've been very instrumental in economic development. In fact, what you see where most of our economic development has been, our large industry, it is either in Duke territory or it is in Santee Cooper or co-op territory. And especially in Santee Cooper and co-op territory, because they've been the ones that would negotiate the better deals. And for large industry, power is like their number one cost. So they have been an important factor. But y'all, the culture at Santee Cooper is corrosive. Now, I've tried very hard to keep an open mind on this, because there are advantages to keeping them. There are advantages to selling them. But I have become convinced over the last several months they do not recognize their problems, and they are not interested in fixing them. They're going to tell you what they need to do to reform, but those are superficial. They're not going to fix anything that matters. They have a cultural problem at Santee Cooper. In fact, I tweeted one day that I think we need to fire everybody who's got decision-making authority, and we need to use one of those MIB neuralizers on everybody else so that they forget everything they've ever learned. So look, I think we really have to think hard about selling them. I'm open to that. Now, I'll tell you candidly, I don't love the offer that's been made, but I also don't like Santee Cooper's reform proposal. So I like what the House did, because what the House did, they said, we're going to make some changes right now, but we're going to keep negotiating. We're going to keep open this idea on a sale. I think that's a good move.
Alan Quinn, if you speak up, that microphone overhead should pick you up. And if you'll excuse me, I left my phone laying up here, and there should be maybe some.
I've been tempted to speak.
Oh, okay, cool. There could be some questions in here for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mal Quinn from Easley.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you coming all the way up here to talk to us. Appreciate Brett Price. And I appreciate your work on the heartbeat bill. And I was excited when I saw it, that it was going to pass the Senate and go on to the House. And then last night I saw, well, they're putting it in an amendment. So my heart sank a little bit. I read about it, and I understand. And I'm kind of where you're at. I understand that if there is an exception to that, it's written in there that law enforcement will be notified to investigate the rape or incest that caused the situation. And I know y'all have that in there, and I hope that you'll see that the House keeps it in there when it comes back to you.
I appreciate you.
I just want to say that's.
No, you're right. I appreciate you bringing that up, because I should have said that earlier. It's true that the amendment included an exception for rape and incest, but that amendment also requires that the physician, we're not putting the burden on the woman, it requires that the physician notify law enforcement, the local sheriff's office, that an alleged violent crime has taken place, right? And so, and when I was questioned about that on the Senate floor, I said, look, I think the state has a compelling interest in investigating, prosecuting, and deterring violent crime. And I think rape and incest are violent crimes. So I want to make sure the law enforcement has that information. And man, the left went ballistic, right? I mean, they went nuts, but because I was having doctors report this stuff. Here's the thing. So South Carolina law already requires doctors to be mandatory reporters of child abuse and neglect, right? So if a doctor is treating a minor patient and believes that this child has been abused or neglected, the doctor has an obligation to report to law enforcement and to DSS that suspicion. We already have in current law that if a doctor performs an abortion on a minor and the child conceived because of rape or incest, the doctor has to report that to law enforcement. All we've done here is we have extended that same process to adults as opposed to just children. I mean, we're not invading the doctor-patient privilege any more than it's already been invaded. But look, we're talking about violent criminal activity, right? I want to stop it. And if I can help stop it with this amendment, then I'm willing to do that. And so I appreciate you reminding me about that. That was an important part of that amendment. Thank you for telling me. Well, thank you for telling me that anyway. Yeah.
Take it out. But anyway, what I want to talk about is the gas tax, or road, or gas tax. And you brought up something a while ago about ideas. And I have an idea. And I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to Rex about it. I think it'll work. The problem with the gas tax trust fund that we have in Columbia is last spring we had $500 million in that fund that had not been spent. And I brought that up to Rex, and I said, we need to get some of that money locally to do it. And we talked about it, and he said, yeah, but they've got to have a certain amount of money to work out to do that. $500 million. Well, now, it's $650 million. It's continually going up. They're going to increase the tax on gas. It's going to go up. We're going to put more cars on the road after COVID. It's going to go up. And by next spring, I think we're going to have $1 billion in that gas tax trust fund. I really think it'll be, and this is a solution, I think. Some of that money comes from the county through the CTC fund from the state. They give the county so much money, and it's a formula which county gets so much. My idea is, okay, you've got $500 billion slush fund. That's what you need to work out. So anytime that gas tax goes over $500 million, it goes to the county. Now, I've talked to people in the county. I've talked to the contractors. They did Rock Springs Road right over there by the farm. Nice road. I talked to him a while. He said, yeah. He said, we can do it. The state says they can't get contract. He said, yeah, we can do it. We can do all the work that you send to them. All I'm saying is, let's give that money, instead of letting it sit in the bank, give it to the counties, and let the counties do the road.
Yeah, so I appreciate that idea. Look, that was a heck of a fight when that bill came up. It was several years in the making, because many of us were insisting that there's got to be some significant reform of DOT before we're ever going to give in on that. I didn't vote for it. I voted to sustain the veto. But there are some good things in there. But I didn't like that there wasn't sufficient reform, and there wasn't any tax rebates in there. We were raising I thought we ought to have some tax rebates along those lines. But here's what I know about the issue that you raised. A couple things. The first one is, because I've asked about that very issue many times, DOT has told me that, and you alluded to this, but that they've had a hard time getting contractors to do all the work. So they haven't been able to spend all the money. And in fact, they told us at the outset, don't give us 12 cents right off the bat. Phase it in, because we can't spend all the money. If you give us 12 cents right now, we can't spend it all. So that's one of the reasons why it's phased in over a period of 6 years, 6 Julys, is to do that. But I've heard that they haven't had enough contractors in order to do that work. Now, that made sense to me, actually, when the economy was really booming, because people had all sorts of job opportunities. They had choices of where they can go, and they didn't want to sit out in 100 degrees on the asphalt all day, because they had something they could do in air conditioning. So I understand that. I'm a little bit frustrated that they didn't do more during the COVID time, when there were fewer cars on the road, and they get to work outside. It seemed to me like they should have been working some more out there, but they slowed down even more. So part of the reason that the number of the trust fund has increased is because they slowed down in the last year. Now that don't make sense to me, but that's part of the explanation as to why it happened. As far as giving it to the counties, I like your idea. I'll tell you though, 2 years before the gas tax passed, mean, several of us, when we were having big surpluses, big budget surpluses. And y'all know what we do when we have a surplus, right? We spend it. Yeah. Well, so several of us were like, look, we need to start spending some of this money on things that people can see some tangible results from. Spend it on the roads, fix our bridges, spend it on those things. Because I get calls still all the time from people fussing because they hit a pothole, right? I mean, y'all know it too, right? I mean, I live in Edgefield. I live in a rural area. I live in an area kind of, y'all know, I mean, the secondary roads are the ones that are the worst. I mean, I understand that. So a couple of years before this happened, we decided we're going to put some money in the budget just for roads. This doesn't happen because our roads are funded by the gas tax. We don't spend income tax money or sales tax money on roads typically, but we did it for 2 years. And one of those years, we sent it to the CTCs because we thought they're quicker, they're better, they're going to get it done quicker. They don't have to deal with a lot of the union contracts that DOT has to deal with because DOT deals with a lot of federal money, right? What happened is we overwhelmed them. And so a lot of some counties got on the ball and they did a good job. Some of them, it took them 2 or 3 years to spend the money because if you got out there early, you were able to hire the contractors. But once all the contractors got hired, then you were in the back of the line. And so a lot of that money didn't get spent till late. I think you're right. I think you've got a good idea. I think you're onto something. I think we ought to send money to the locals more so than at the state level. But we're going to have to, as part of that process, we got to think about giving them the tools they need in order to spend the money. Because I don't like it sitting in an account in Columbia. I don't want it to sit in an account in Easley either, right? I mean, we need to spend the money. We need to get the potholes fixed. We need to get the roads resurfaced. We need to get the bridges repaired. But I appreciate that. That's a good idea.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann, and thank you for coming tonight.
Hey, Mary Ann.
Hello. My question is, you have a supermajority. What are you going to do to insulate South Carolina from that person in Washington? Why can't we be like Mississippi, Texas, Florida, and fight back upon this? Because I'm hearing a lot of things that I don't like, and hear a lot of things that are terrifying me. And no, I don't want to be like Georgia. So what are you going to do to protect me?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So we actually don't have a supermajority. We're just shy of a supermajority. But I think we got a couple Democrats, it sounds like, that may get gigs in Washington, and suits me if they go, because there's some of these guys that I don't care to listen to every day. But actually, one of those seats is one that's in a marginal district that I think if he gets a job in Washington, we're going to win that seat. So that would give us a supermajority. But we are just below that supermajority threshold, and it is an important number. 30 is a big number. 31 would be a huge number. Because 31, there's nothing that they could do to stop us on anything. But I will say this. South Carolina, one of the reasons that you don't hear as much about that out of South Carolina than what you hear in other states is because South Carolina has actually been pretty proactive on that over the years. So South Carolina has already said, we've got something called anti-commandeering, which was, it was something that the U.S. Supreme Court decided, 15, 20 years ago, where basically they said the federal government cannot commandeer local law enforcement to make them enforce federal law. So, and we've got that in our laws, right? So our local sheriffs, our state law enforcement, they don't have to comply with that. So we've pushed back on some of those things. There are some other areas, particularly on immigration in the early years of Governor Haley's administration, where we passed one of the toughest immigration laws at that time anywhere in the country. And we pushed back on some of that. In fact, we made the feds real nervous because of what we were doing with reporting some of these people to try to have them deported. So I think part of the reason you don't hear about that as much from South Carolina is that South Carolina's already pushed back to some degree. Now, does that mean we're perfect? No, it doesn't. Are there areas we can improve? Yes, ma'am. Right there, and we're going to have to be vigilant and pay very close attention to what happens in Washington, to what they're doing and what they're talking about and what they're proposing, so that we can get ahead of that stuff in order to protect you and me and everybody else. I think we've got to be careful. You got to listen to them. They're pretty creative, right? I mean, that lefty crowd, I mean, they're pretty shrewd, right? So we got to be careful and we got to pay attention to those things. But I encourage you're going to pay attention too. I can tell you're somebody who pays attention. And if if you hear something, let us know. Let Rex know. Let me know. That's fine. Well, Rex is going to figure it out too. He pays attention too. But look, I think if stuff like that starts happening to the extent that we can, I think you're going to see South Carolina's going to buck up. All right.
We're watching closely, more closely than I think anybody has ever watched before.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've got to be diligent.
Yeah. Vigilant. Yeah.
Vigilant.
That's right. One of those words. No. I think that's true. I'll tell you, the job that I have is big enough. All right, and there's a lot that comes along with this. There's a lot of work with it. So I need you to look out. All right, so you let us know if you think there's something that we need to do, and hopefully we can get there. All right, thank you.
I got one. I'm gonna get to all you folks, I promise. And I appreciate your patience taking all these questions. We appreciate you coming and taking the time to do this. I got another one that was emailed to me. Judicial reform. Can we change the way we go about getting judges in South Carolina? Please.
Yeah, man, this has been a frustrating topic for a long time. And so for those of you who may not be familiar with our process is actually unique. I mean, there's only one other state. Virginia has a process kind of like ours. There are some states that elect their judges. Georgia and North Carolina, our neighbors, they do that. They have popular elections to elect their judges. We don't do that. There are some states that follow the federal model where the chief executive, the governor, appoints judges. We don't do that either. Either one of those things makes you susceptible to the political whims of the day. And that can be very dangerous. I mean, we see that. Look, if you look around at the federal court system, you look at some of these judges that have been appointed by different presidents. I mean, you could present the same issue in South Carolina and in California, and you get two completely different results because of presidential appointments and the senators having some influence on that. I don't really like that approach either. Our approach is one where you apply to be a judge, you get screened by a commission that includes legislators and some lay people, and then that commission reports 3 qualified people out, up to 3 qualified people, and then the legislature elects among those people. Now, what that should do is you should get middle-of-the-road judges, right? You should get that, because if you're too crazy one way or another, you're not going to be able to get the votes you need in the legislature to make that happen. Now, what's happened over the years is legislators have gotten lazy. And instead of really scrutinizing the qualifications of these judicial candidates and what they believe and looking at what their worldview is, legislators have tended to vote for the person who was at the reception last night, or who told me that they knew my grandfather, right? So that type of thing, and that's all great. I mean, I'm glad to see you last night, but that don't tell me you're going to be a good judge. And we got into problems with this. We especially got into problems with this at the Supreme Court level, where the state Supreme Court, they started rewriting our state constitution. They started putting words in there that wasn't there, and there was some backlash to that. And we got very engaged in the judicial process thereafter. And so now we have a pretty reliably strong state Supreme Court. We're in a good position with our state Supreme Court. But what happens is the trial court levels, which is where so many people in the public interact with judges, that's where we're still doing a poor job. I think we're getting a little bit better, but in the family court system, which is, look, man, if anybody who's had a family court, had to go to family court, it is probably one of the worst days of your life if you're going in there, right? And we've had a real problem getting qualified people to serve as family court judges. We've got to fix that, man. Our circuit courts those are our general courts. They handle civil cases. They handle criminal cases. We've done a little bit better there, but we've got to do an even better job of screening those candidates and make sure we're getting good candidates in those positions. So, yeah, I think we need to listen to reform ideas, because there are areas that we need to improve. We could do a whole lot worse than what we have, but we could do better too.
Here you go. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, John Foster from Norris. Hi there. The federal people want to do an outlandish thing and raise the federal minimum wage. That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the state minimum wage. Whom do I discuss, maybe you, about raising that to a livable wage?
So my understanding is that the state minimum wage is, yeah, but I think it's constitutional, right? So it makes it more difficult to deal with. I'll tell you also, I think you would have a hard time getting the votes in the General Assembly to increase the minimum wage, because what we would prefer to do, what I would prefer to do, and look, and I'm cheap, right? So some of y'all have paid some attention to me, over the years. You see how I vote on stuff. As my wife says, I'm cheap, right? I mean, because I voted against the budget more than I voted for it, because I think we either spend too much money or we don't prioritize very well. But one of the things that I would actually spend more money on is we've got to do a better job of training our citizens, whether they be school-age children or adults, providing opportunities for people to get the skills, the training, and the education they need to compete in the workforce today. It is a very competitive workforce, and we are not just competing. Look, you're not just competing with people from Charleston now, right? You're competing with people from Michigan and people from China. Right, so we've got to give you the opportunity to better yourself, because I believe in work, and I believe in individual initiative, and I believe in individual responsibility. But we got to give you the opportunities to get those things, right? And if you don't take advantage of it, well, that's on you. But it's on us if we don't provide those opportunities. I think that's a big deal with our school children, because lots of times I think one of our biggest deficiencies is in the guidance counseling area, where they're not exposed to all the opportunities that are out there. Y'all, there are a lot of kids right here who don't know that we're building massive airplanes in North Charleston, right? There are kids right here who don't know that we build more tires in South Carolina than any state in the country, right? And there are people in Charleston who don't know that we're building fighter jets just up the road. That's cool, right? But there are a lot of kids who don't know about that. We've got to do a better job of exposing them to those opportunities. And then we've got to make sure that they can get the skills, the training that they need in order to compete for those things, right? So I think this is an area where we need some stronger statewide leadership on. We've got to have better communication between business and industry and the state government, and for the higher education with our technical colleges and our universities, so that, one, we all know what types of skills employees of the future are going to need. Business knows what they need, right? Industry knows what they're going to need in a few years, right? We need to work with our technical colleges, especially our universities sometimes, but especially our technical colleges, so that we're providing the opportunities that children can get those skills to compete, that adults who may want to change careers can get the training that they need to compete for those jobs. I want South Carolinians to get those jobs. We have done a tremendous job over the last 10 years in industry recruitment, economic development. I mean, Nikki Haley made this like her singular focus, right? She was announcing jobs every week, right? And that's tremendous. But you know what really burns me up is when the people who get those jobs are coming from California and Illinois and New York, right? I want South Carolina's children to be able to compete for those jobs. We've got to do a better job of that. So rather than raising the minimum wage, I want people to aspire to be better. And I want us to help provide the opportunities to be better. And if we do that, we will be much better overall, all of us.
And that's good. I was raised a farmer in upstate New York, and I had asbestos training, and I've cleaned factories.
Sorry to beat up on New York, man.
I know, upstate New York, not
that's
downstate's
different.
fake.
Yeah.
I'm a farmer from
upstate New York's different. Upstate New York's kind of normal.
Opposed to Tina in Canada, for God's sakes. Anyways, but I was raised on a farm. I had asbestos training. I cleaned factories up and down the East Coast for years. So hands-on training is good as computer beep, beep, beep
Absolutely.
stuff. Yeah.
And I would throw in anybody looking for a job. BMW needs help. MAU does their hiring. It's entry level, $17.50 an hour. They train you with the potential of moving into a $20 an hour plus job. Well, I'm just telling you what I know.
Yeah. I mean, and look, and I'll tell you, Rick, to that point, I think that's something that we need to do a better job of too, right? I think this is something that state government should do, and I think it wouldn't take but a little bit of leadership in order to make this happen at the executive level. But that is, people need to know what the opportunities are, right? People, look, if people in this room don't know the different people around here are hiring, that's a problem, right? Because we need more people working, right? We need more people earning money. We need more people paying taxes. We need to broaden the base of people as opposed to narrowing it. We need more people involved in that. So I think we need to do a better job of that. Yes, sir.
Trent Bates, originally from Liberty, South Carolina, now live in Central. I don't think we had a convention last year, so I'm still the president of the Lawrence Chapel Precinct with the Pickens County GOP. So
that's one of those jobs.
I hate
like
to
at
throw
church.
my weight around like that, but
yeah, that's one of those jobs, man. That once you get it, it's like being at church. You never get rid of it.
Hey, I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being here tonight. I have a couple of questions for you. You talked about the schools and how the test scores with the kids in school are kind of slumping. Looking at that and thinking about our state scholarship system, does the Senate and the House have any plans to address that? The fact that the kids that are trying to get these scholarships now have not had the same amount of time in class and have not had the same opportunities to take the test?
So that's an issue. In fact, that was an issue last year because we have three different levels of state-supported scholarships, and you have an opportunity based on like SAT scores or ACT scores to go from one level to another. And there are a number of children a lot of high school seniors who will take those tests multiple times, because if you get a higher score, you move them to a higher scholarship category. You get it's worth a lot more money, and especially if you're a parent, you're gonna push them out. Like you need to take this test again.
I am a parent.
Yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. But because COVID caused SAT and ACT to cancel like the last 3 tests that they would have given, when a lot of these kids would have taken that test again, and many of them would have gotten much more scholarship money if they could have taken it. So we had to do some adjustments to account for that. But I think what you're talking about is we're going to have a similar situation this year. It may be a little bit different it may not be the SAT and ACT, but it's going to be, they're not going to have the same type of progress in their high school class rank, maybe, right?
Well, it's still the ACT and SAT because they didn't get the chance to take it in the spring, which they could have used as an opportunity to target what they needed to improve on.
That's right.
The tests weren't going on a lot of the summer, and even recently my daughter took the ACT, but she had to wear a mask for the entire 4 hours of the test.
Yeah.
That's different.
Sure. No, that's right. So I think that's a good point. I haven't really heard much talk about that so far early this session, but I'm glad you mentioned that to me. I'm going to have to talk to some of our education folks. That's something we need to look at.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Another issue, and again, I appreciate you being here this evening. I appreciate Mr. Rice always being so accessible and being with us. After the election and the events of the election, like a lot of people, was kind of down, so it's really good to have you here and talk about some of the accomplishments and some of the gains. I think it was a post I read by Sebastian Gorka where he said that the 2 big things that are on the minds of Republicans right now are big tech censorship and election integrity. I think for me personally, you look at the big tech censorship, and then you also look at groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center who are labeling individuals and groups, and then people taking action based on that. My guess is that the majority of the churches in Pickens County would be labeled as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And my question to you is, looking at that, do y'all plan to do anything to address that sort of labeling and those sort of attacks on people of faith or people of different beliefs? I know we have laws that say you can't discriminate, but it's happening.
Yeah, so to that point, it wouldn't surprise me if 30 of us in the South Carolina Senate today are about to be labeled as extremists or terrorists or something because of some of those labels. Look, man, I'm a Southern kid, right? I'm a Southern Baptist, so I've got all kinds of problems, right? With that group. Look, I think this is counterproductive for them, honestly, because I think when you start telling everybody that they're extremists, and when you start telling people that they're terrorists, and that just because they disagree with you on something that they're racists, right? Because that term, I mean, look, just a few years ago, that term meant something, right? And there ain't nobody in this room who wanted to be called a racist, right? But they start throwing that term around because they knew that you didn't want to be called those names. And what it does is it covers for the real racists, right? When everybody's a racist, nobody's a racist. And that's a real problem. And the same thing with hate. There is a lot of hate out there. I mean, we know that, right? There's a lot of hate out there. There's hate on both sides, on both extremes, right? Everybody's not a terrorist. And when you call everybody those names, when you give everybody those labels, it covers for the people who are the real problems. I mean, just because we disagree on an issue doesn't mean that I'm evil, right? If you disagree with me on something, it's not because you hate people, right? We can have honest disagreements about issues, and we've got to stamp out the real extreme. We've got to stamp out the real hate, the real terror, and the real racism. We've got it, and as Republicans, we've got to take those stands. All right, I believe we need to do that. But we do have to push back, as you said, sir, on these labels. But I think they're counterproductive because, and the reason I say that is, people aren't going to put up with that stuff, right? You're going to get a rise of people who are saying, this is ridiculous, right? And all that's doing is causing even more hate and more divide. So I agree we got to push back on it. And I also, look, you know, this is tough too, because sometimes I get real emotional and I get mad about stuff like that. And typically I make the worst decisions when I'm mad, right? I want to win more people to my cause. I don't think I've got to sell my philosophy to most South Carolinians because I think they've already bought it. But I do think how you deliver it is important. I want to win elections. I want to win elections with good candidates who are going to govern in a good, conservative, strong manner, people who've got some backbone. And that means that we've got to present things in the right way. But I don't want to get into a tit for tat with these groups who are calling me all the names. Right? I'm going to be, as I tell my kids lots of times when they're complaining about other kids, you know, she said this about me, or, you know, he did that. I'm like, you do you, man. You do you. I'm going to do me, and I'm going to do my best to comply with what the good Lord tells me I should do, and I think that's going to reflect on other things. But I'll tell you, the more that happens, the less that people are going to tolerate it, and there's going to be some backlash to that. So I think we got to push back, but I think we got to do it in the right way. I'm a man of faith. I'm going to try to live my life like that. Sometimes I'm going to screw up, all right? And I need people who are going to keep me in line, right? And the good thing is my mama's not shy about slapping me in the back of the head. But I'm with you, man. That stuff drives me crazy. But I think we've got to make sure that we respond the right way, because there are a lot of people who are watching. We talk about this in my Sunday school class a lot. There are people who are watching, right? And they're waiting for you to screw up. I think we've got to be careful about how we respond to those things. Yeah.
Well, we'll wind things down. This gentleman has a question, and then I got one to close it out with, and we'll say goodnight.
Thomas?
How you doing?
Good.
Obviously, you know me. My name's Thomas Golden. I live in Central. I'm going to ask you one thing that's kind of dear to my heart. What have y'all done for OIF and OEF veterans?
All right, help me out with the acronyms.
Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom.
Yeah.
Because 385, it stops at Vietnam War, and it says further wars after that. That ain't, I mean, I'm an OIF veteran. That ain't cool with me.
Yeah.
Lost a lot of good men over there.
You lost too many.
We don't have a memorial. We don't have anything that stands up like that. What are y'all going to do?
That's a great question. Rex, we need to do something about that. You're right. I mean, we
Thank you for your service.
No, yeah, absolutely, Thomas. Look, I don't know if y'all know, Thomas told me earlier, 2 tours, 15 months each. Man gave 30 months of his life that he's never going to get back. But fortunately, he made it back when a lot of his good buddies didn't. Thank you, Thomas. And as I told him, that means that the good Lord wants you to do something else. He brought you back for a reason. But you're right. We do tend to focus on, we've done a lot for World War II, and we should honor those people. They literally saved the world. We focus a lot. We don't focus as much on Korea. We should. We focus a lot on Vietnam. We focused a lot on other things. We haven't done many memorials for our recent combat veterans. I think that's guilty, man. We need to do a better job on that. Rex and I are going to talk about that. We'll see if we can come up with something. I think that's a really good idea. We need to try to do some things to try to honor our more recent veterans as well. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Yeah, thank you.
Come back full circle here. Something you talked pretty extensively about at the beginning, education. Yeah. Tim Scott has got a opinion piece on Fox News. It came out today, addressing school choice, and it's school choice is in our platform, in the party platform, and under the circumstances with everything that's went on with COVID and with the schools. Basically, Tim Scott is making a point, and I agree with him, that the time has never been better to go forward with school choice, real, meaningful school choice. Got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so for the last 2 or 3 years, actually Rex and I both served on a subcommittee that's been looking at a program for education savings accounts, ESAs. And what we've tried to do is we've really tried to narrow this down to the children who, what I want to focus on, because this is a real hot topic in the General Assembly, right? This is a tough one because there's a lot of there's a lot of support, but there's a lot of opposition too, and that's why nothing significant has happened. I think in 2013, for the first time, 2013, we got adopted the exceptional needs tax credits. So for children with certain disabilities, they're able to use some tax credits in order to go to different places. But what really, and look, I'll tell you, I'm a public school guy, right? I went to public schools all my life, and I think I've done pretty well with it. My children are both in public school. I have options for private schools, but my children are there because I think they need that experience, and I think they're learning really well. For me personally, it's better for them to be there than it would be in some private schools. Although we've got some great private schools around, and I like them, and I don't have anything against them. That's just for me. My children are better there. But there are, y'all, in many places around this state, there are children of very limited means who are stuck in consistently underperforming schools. They are stuck. And they have no way out. And so in this bill that Rex and I have been working on with a few others, what we've really tried to focus on, those children who have some types of disabilities or special needs that are not able to take advantage of what we've done so far, but who are not getting the services they need in the school in which they're zoned for. And we're trying very hard to look at these children. Sometimes they're in the inner cities, sometimes they're in rural areas where their schools suck, right? Now, that's not the majority of our schools. I mean, we've got some terrific teachers. We've got some really good schools around this state. We have some that are consistently underperforming. And those children are stuck. They don't have a choice, right? And I'm going to tell you, I don't care if you put another $1,000 per child in Allendale, it's not fixing it. Right, you can send another $1,000 per child to Williamsburg. It's not fixing it. Right, we've got to do something radical and do something different. Now, do we need to spend more money on education? Look, I told you I'm cheap. I think we need to spend more money in certain areas. I think we need to do a better job of allocating the money that we do spend. I think we need to pay teachers more. Right, but that's not going to fix everything. I think we need to keep our options open. And look, usually when Tim says something, I listen. Because I'm a big Tim Scott fan. His ideas, his opportunity zones, his personal story is incredible. But I think we need to look at that. different options, especially for these children who are stuck in these schools that are just consistently underperforming. That's not the majority of our schools, because again, we have some really awesome teachers who are doing incredible work. I mean, and what they've been doing over the last year is even more incredible. They've had to basically change their lesson plans and how they teach and everything. I mean, what they've been able to accomplish is amazing. But there are some schools that are just, they're not performing in a manner that we can accept. And so for those children, I think we have to give them another opportunity. Right? And so I'm with you on that. Rex and I put a lot of time into it. We're going to keep working on that issue. He's been a pretty strong advocate for that issue up here. But that's something that I think we do need to look at. We need to look at it even more. And Tim may be right that now is an even better opportunity, because COVID has exposed more of those problems than we knew about before, especially in some of the smaller rural areas, right, where they don't have access to internet. There's a lot of South Carolina that does not have internet access. Those children now who are home doing remote education with no internet access, do you really need a test score to tell you how well that's going to turn out? So I think we need to look at those opportunities, Rick. And I thank you for mentioning it. I need to go back and read what Tim wrote. But that's something that we've got to be willing to be more radical in education. This is something this has been the number one issue at the State House for the last couple of years. It's the number one issue in our state budget. A lot of people don't believe that. We spend more money on education than we spend on anything else. In fact, we spend more money on education than we spend on everything else, right? K-12 plus higher education combined is over half of our state budget, right? If you add in Medicaid, that's about 3/4 of our state budget. So the rest of state government operates off 25%. Now it's expensive, right? Understandably, it's expensive. And as cheap as I am, I'm good with spending money to educate children, because again, I want to prepare them to be able to compete in a very competitive global workforce. But that means we got to do some things differently. And one of the frustrations that I have, I'm getting a little bit off topic here a little bit, but no, I mean, look, we're going to put more money into education, right? Money's easy. Money doesn't take any ideas, right? Just writing a check is easy. Fixing the structural problems is much more difficult. And you know, we get a lot of teachers who are upset because they say that you don't care, you're not doing anything. The problem is not the legislators don't care. The problem is that all legislators care, right? Everybody cares. Everybody's got an idea. And it's so very difficult to get the consensus that you need to make meaningful change in something that is so ingrained, right? But we need some significant, meaningful change in education. And I will tell you, it will not happen unless you have some engaged, visionary, statewide leadership on that issue, right? Somebody's got to understand it, go around and sell it to the public so that you're going to contact your legislators about it. Because if we don't have that consistent vision at a statewide level, nothing meaningful will happen. We'll nibble around the edges, but we're not going to get the consensus that we need without that leadership to make it happen. We'll spend some money, we'll do a few things here and there, but y'all, we are stuck in a 1950s agrarian educational system. It is a very different time. We are not adequately preparing our children for what they need to do to compete later on. We've got to do much better there. And if some type of choice is a help in that regard, then I'm willing to listen to that.
Sounds like we need a governor or a state senator or a United States senator to get behind it, but somebody that can speak to the whole state and get.
Yeah, it's got to be. You need it. You know, we had on the ballot a couple of years ago whether the state superintendent of education should be appointed by the governor or should continue to be elected, right? And I was, as I often am, I was in the minority on that because I thought that the state superintendent of education ought to be appointed. And the reason I took that position is because we are desperate for leadership statewide with education. Because right now, we have a tremendously talented state superintendent of education. Like, I'm a Molly Spearman fan. The problem is that the people, if I hadn't just said her name, I bet half the crowd in here, and y'all are engaged, I bet half the crowd in here couldn't have named who our state superintendent of education is, right? So she is so far down the ballot that people don't pay attention that far down. So if Molly comes around and she's trying to sell something, people aren't going to listen. And it's not because she doesn't have the right ideas. It's not because she's not right. It's because people don't know who she is. And it's not her fault. She needs the power of the governor behind her, because everybody knows who the governor is. When the governor comes to town, the press pays attention, right? Everybody knows who the governor is. We need to, and education is an issue in every gubernatorial race, even though the governor has no power in education whatsoever. None. Zip. Right? But it should be an issue in every governor's race. And we ought to give the governor the authority to deal with it. And we ought, that way we'll know who we can hold accountable when things aren't going well. But right now, we're kind of floundering because you got a state superintendent that has a good bit of power. You got a state school board. You got an education oversight commission. You got the state legislature that really runs the show. And you got a governor who talks about it some but can't do anything about it. I mean, we have a system that has been so broken up because we don't like centralizing power, and I'm not a big fan of centralizing stuff either. But we have decentralized it to such an extent that nothing can get done. So it's not that people don't care. It's that Ben Tillman created a very effective system so that nothing can happen.
I promise we need to wrap up, but I got to ask this. You are very quick on your feet and very thoughtful, and I appreciate all the answers you've given tonight. So what is the path? I mean, you're the leader. You're the guy who's been working on this stuff for a while. How do we improve education? How do we get out of the 50s system? What is the path forward?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we took an approach last year in the Senate, and the House kind of worked with us some, but we undertook a massive piece of legislation, a very comprehensive educational bill. Now, we were even saying, this isn't where we're going to stop. We're going to keep doing stuff every year. But it was a massive piece of legislation. We spent 8 or 9 weeks on this thing last year. I mean, it was one of those times where, I was looking for the hardest wall to bang my head against. This thing, it was so frustrating listening to some of this stuff. And we learned a hard lesson from that. And that is, it was too big of a bite to take. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to take some important smaller steps this year. And one of the things that we're going to start off with is a bill that holds school boards accountable, because in some of these areas where the schools are consistently underperforming, consistently, year after year after year, and the school board's not asking for help, they're not asking the State Department for help, they just keep doing the same things over again, and they get the same results. Surprise, right? We are failing the children in those school districts. And so we're gonna talk about something that would hold school board members accountable. Now, we're already getting major pushback on that, but that one would have an impact in some areas, and it's gonna be a tough debate. There are a number of other things, but I'll tell you again, it is going to be difficult for the legislature to get the consensus necessary unless we've got some statewide leadership on this. What we really need is we need somebody at the statewide level who understands it and who has a vision on what education ought to look like. And he's willing to go around to the state and sell it to you, to convince you this is the best approach, right? It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of thought, but it's going to take a lot of work. This is a hard problem, right? But we can't just keep spinning, right? We can't just keep doing what we're doing. It's going to take vision. It's going to take somebody who will get engaged, who's going to interact with legislators, because that's important too, but somebody who's going to sell the vision. And if we don't do that, Rick, if we don't have that, nothing meaningful will happen.
Folks, I'm sorry, we've just run out of time. We usually don't go quite this long, but don't mean that as criticism.
I'm a senator. I talk too long. It's just part of the gig.
No. Here's the thing. It is a privilege and a treat to have the majority leader of the state Senate here with us, and to have you take the time to take all these questions and answer. What good is a one-word answer, too? There's the other side of that, too. So you've actually given us your thoughts on this stuff. Would you join me in thanking him? I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. You're welcome to come back anytime you want. You have an open invitation to our camera and our live stream. Anything you want to do, you just call me and let me know, and I'll set it up.
Very generous. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
I'll say this. It's always nice. It's always nice when people don't fall asleep and when nobody throws anything at you. So I consider this a successful trip.
And have a safe drive home. And guys, next month, last Thursday in February, we will have the state chairman of the GOP here, Drew McKissick. So you get to meet the state chairman and talk to him. Come back and join us again. Good night. Be safe going home. Steve can tell the dates. I don't think we've got them yet. I'll send out an email to everybody on that.